Hello and good afternoon. I'm Alison from Team ProDog, and we are interviewing today with Dr. Katie Woodley, aka the Natural Pet Doctor. And today's discussion is all around allergies and associated issues. This discussion is going to be all centered around whether you have changed your pet's diet, your dog's diet. You've changed to a really great raw or whole food diet, but your allergy symptoms have not improved. They might have got even worse, and you're now at a bit of a loss of what to do. So this is unfortunately quite common. So we have invited Dr. Katie Woodley, who better to take us through a step-by-step guide on how to deal and hopefully combat this. So welcome, Dr. Katie. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Allison, for having me. And I'm really excited because this is a huge issue and it's super frustrating for a lot of pet parents to figure out because they thought food would be the final magic thing to help fix their pet's itchiness. And unfortunately, a lot of times, as we're going to talk about today, there's a lot of other factors that people just aren't aware of. So we're going to bring those blind spots to light so that they can start diving deeper into their pet's care and hopefully ultimately fix the itchy skin and allergy issue.
Yeah, that's great. So as I say, we have lots of pet parents that have changed the diet from a processed food into either a home cooked or a raw diet, and they have seen massive improvements. But like we said, unfortunately, it doesn't happen for all. So I think what we'll go through is what other factors do cause itchy skin, what we can rule out, those sorts of things, and then do a step-by-step guide, which will hopefully help people have some sort of plan to get to their dogs and their pets just being in a much more comfortable position.
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think too, for everyone listening, if you're still feeding a more processed food diet like kibble, I always say, number one, do try to transition over to a less processed food diet because it can work for a lot of
Yeah.
pets. So we're going to have a lot of tools and tips. So if you haven't done that step, highly recommend doing that step first because you might not need these other things. They're things to keep in mind and think about. So keep watching because it's really, really important. But there are a lot of factors that cause itchy skin, and it's not always necessarily allergies. And I think that gets a lot of pet parents stuck too, where they're trying all the supplements and all these other things. They're using allergy medications and they're not seeing a response. And what I found in my personal experience in my clinic and working with a lot of pet parents with itchy skin problems is that there's so many other factors that haven't been explored yet. So this is where, of course, we need to rule out parasites.
Yeah.
So fleas are a huge issue. And even just one little tiny flea bite can make a dog start scratching and itching like crazy if they're sensitive to them.
Yeah.
And you might not see the flea. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of great natural flea and tick repellents and sprays. I know ProDog Raw has an amazing product that works really well. I have some clients in the States that actually visited the UK and
Well,
bought that, and they said their pet is great. So,
excellent.
there's a lot of great supplements we can use to help optimize the body and naturally repel those, but we need to be thinking about parasites. Over here in the States, I don't know if it's as big of an issue in the UK. We have a lot of wildlife, especially in Colorado, and there's certain types of mange. So sarcoptic mange is a mite that we can't visibly see, but can be spread through wildlife. So like a coyote or a fox will walk through the yard and then it'll mites will drop off into the environment, and then your dog goes through that grassy area or bushes, and all of a sudden those mites are now on your dog, and that can make them super itchy too. The way to diagnose that is to do a skin scrape with your veterinarian. So if they're really, really, really itchy, please do take them to the vet so that they can do some of those diagnostics to make sure that we're actually treating the right things. We don't want to miss that because food and all the beautiful herbs, a lot of times we won't touch that. So
Yeah.
make sure we're ruling that out. The other thing too, if your dog is chewing at certain spots or scratching at certain areas. So a lot of times I'll see dogs chew on their front limbs and they create a sore and then they just focus on that. we need to make sure that there's not any pain, or if they have like what's really common, osteoarthritis in the spine, we call that intervertebral disc
Yeah.
disease. What can happen is it can kind of compress the nerves. And so they end up getting pain down the limb. So think about yourself with like sciatica is a common one in people where, you have that big nerve running down your leg and you feel like this kind of shooting, dull pain sensation down your leg. Think about how your dog would respond to something like that. They're going to chew and nibble and lick excessively to try to self-soothe. So it's really important to rule out like the pain or the injuries. And a lot of times, like chiropractic or acupuncture can really benefit those animals too. The other big thing that I find in my practice, we do a lot of testing and hair tissue tests. So heavy metals or like sluggish detox pathways are a huge issue also for a lot of pets, where we're constantly exposed to things in the environment, heavy metals, other toxins, things like glyphosate. We just live in a toxic world. It doesn't mean we need to be in fear about it. But once we become aware about it, and we're going to talk about certain things you can do in the first phase of our guide of how to help your pet, there what we can do is optimize those pathways so those toxins can get out. Because if they can't, what happens is it builds up, it leads to increased inflammation, and that can manifest as itchiness too. So detox is a really big part
Yeah.
of supporting an itchy pet. That is commonly missed or forgotten about or just not even known about. It's like a blind spot, unfortunately, for a lot of my veterinary colleagues and for pet parents that can keep them stuck. And then of course, we're going to be talking about gut health
Yeah.
because there's a huge connection between the gut and the skin. There's a gut skin axis, and a lot of these conditions originate from the gut and poor gut health. Even though it doesn't seem like a gut problem, your dog can have perfect, beautiful stools and
Yeah.
still have a gut health issue that's manifesting as chronic ear infections, itchy skin, hot spots, itchiness, all those things. So we definitely want to make sure that we are looking to the gut and doing all we can to optimize the gut health and the microbiome and all the beneficial microbes that should be living in the gut.
So yeah, so if we've basically pet parents need to get all these things ruled out via their vet. If all of those have been ruled out and there's no parasites, there's no pain and injuries, then we do need to look, as we say, at gut and digestive health. So maybe you can just explain a little bit about what leaky gut is, what dysbiosis is, and that sort of thing, so that people can understand that, if that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So when we think about the gut, it's not just about digestion. Now, that's really important, and that can actually lead to some of the gut health problems if we're lacking digestive enzymes, we don't have enough stomach acid, very important and common problems in dogs, especially as they age. But what can happen is, so ideally in an optimal gut, we want to have quite a wide, diverse range of beneficial bacteria, microbes. We call that the microbiome. So
Hmm.
trillions of different types of microorganisms. They should all be living in a happy, healthy, harmonic state.
Yeah.
And when that happens, we don't have a lot of inflammation in the gut lining. We also have 70%, at least 70% of our immune system locally within the gut too. So if things are off, where we have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, we call that dysbiosis,
Hmm.
or we're lacking diversity of a lot of different types of strains because maybe our pets have received antibiotics, they might be on medications for pain, or they might be on acid reducers for acid reflux, they might be on Apoquel or Cytopoint that's impacting the microbiome
Yeah.
too. We end up with this imbalance, and that imbalance in the microbiome, what happens is those microbes then produce inflammatory chemicals and compounds. Those lead to inflammation in the gut lining, and that gut lining should be nice and tight. So it's held together with what are called tight junctions.
Yeah.
If we start getting lots of inflammation and irritation, they start separating. And now what's happening is that food, bacteria, toxins can pass through. And just on the other side of that gut lining is the circulatory system, the immune system, and that immune system is seeing things that it shouldn't see. So they're foreign. So what happens is it mounts an inappropriate, well, it's actually appropriate because it's doing its job,
Oh yeah.
but it mounts an immune response where it's like, this is something's off. We need to go into high gear. And then what happens is we end up with more inflammation, those inflammatory chemicals and mediators, they're now in the circulatory, the blood system, and they circulate throughout the body. Well, that goes to the skin. So that's why we're going to see increased inflammation, itchiness, ear infections, things like that. And that's how that gut skin connection works. So we want to be thinking about, okay, well, what are the factors that cause leaky gut
Yeah.
that lead to like this dysbiosis? Because I still feel like the primary reason is not leaky gut, it's a symptom of other factors that cause leaky gut. So we still have to go back to my favorite question, why does that happen?
Yeah.
That why is leaky gut there? And then we can dive deeper into, okay, well, these are potential factors for my own dog. And then we can kind of go through the protocol of how I use to actually start healing that body to heal leaky gut and prevent that from happening in the first place. So thinking about the why. So first let's talk about what are some of the causes so
Yeah.
that people can like go through a checklist of like, my dog's on that, or wow, I'm still using that. I just didn't realize it can lead to this, because that's going to be very important for our checklist of how do we start healing and using the 5R approach that we're going to go through to make it super simple for pet parents. So thinking about, is your dog on any medications right now? So, quality of life is always the most important thing. I say that a lot. I am not against conventional medications. I'm against inappropriate use of
Yeah.
conventional medications. And a lot of these meds, a lot of times we can find an herbal remedy or other type of natural support that actually replaces them and doesn't come with some of these side effects. But once again, if you need to use these, it's okay. So I'm giving you permission to take a breath. If you're like, oh my gosh, I'm killing my pet, you're not. But if we know that there's something that's creating potential resistance to your dog healing, we can actually use other things to help support them. And don't worry, we're going to give you those tactics.
Yeah.
So medications. So think about, is my dog on any medications right now for pain? I mentioned acid reflux,
Yeah.
for allergy medications. Have they received any antibiotics in the past? And I said past also, or are they currently on it? Because one dose of antibiotics can actually wipe out the microbiome, and those can have lasting effects for years.
Yeah.
So just because it might have been a couple of years ago, your dog's gut health might not have recovered. So we just need to be thinking about that, looking at their history. Also, to stress can cause leaky gut directly because of the gut brain connection. So thinking about like, my dog's always anxious, or I feel really anxious, like, we're going to be talking about some of the ways to reset the environment with simple, easy, free tools that you can use to help balance that and support the gut. But right now, I just want you to be thinking in your head, like, okay, yep, stress could be contributing. Now, chemicals. So thinking about, right now we're in the summertime, and the place that I live loves just spraying all the grass with herbicides and pesticides. My
Yeah.
neighbors are fogging, which is absolutely madness to me. But it's one of those things. I recognize it, I see it, so I can support my health and my pet's health because I know it's there. So thinking about, are you currently using any herbicides or pesticides in your yard that your dog's coming into contact with? Are your neighbors using something that they might be walking on? We're getting an idea of what could be their toxin load.
Yeah.
And then looking internally in the house, because we can control the things in our house much more easily than the external environment. So thinking about, what laundry detergent, what cleaning products am I using? Now, I don't know what brands you have over in, or what they're called in the UK, but here, like Tide is a really common laundry detergent over here. It's probably same chemicals, it's probably just a different name over
Yeah.
in the UK, but it stays in the blankets and the sheets and the clothing for like 6 weeks, and that by itself can lead to a really itchy pet when they're sensitive to it. So I just want you to kind of take an inventory of, like, when you're doing your dishes, like, look at the back of the bottle of the dishwasher detergent. Like, would I be comfortable with this being on my body for an extended period of time? Like, thinking about, my dog is going to be eating from this bowl or this plate that I'm washing it in. Looking at water sources. Are we using tap water, or are we filtering the water? Also, too, looking at, causes. We're going to be talking about things like food and certain types of foods to actually feed the microbiome, like prebiotics, digestive issues. So if your pet is prone to things like digestive upset, or they're really sensitive, we want to be thinking about low stomach acid. How do we support that? How do we help them break down their food better? Heavy metals, EMFs are commonly missed.
Yeah.
So if you have a lot of Wi-Fi, you have smart devices in your house that are constantly on, it's creating a buzz in your house. It is energy, it is vibrating cells, it is doing things. And a lot of times disconnecting or putting on airplane mode can make a huge difference. So things to think about. If you've been in a moldy environment or house, mold sucks. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
I
it
work with
does.
a
It
lot of
does.
clients that have mold. It aggravates the heck out of, and it comes along with things like candida or yeast overgrowth. They tend to come together alongside heavy metals. They like to all live together and just create a hot mess in the body. So thinking about like, okay, I have a mold issue that is going to definitely probably create dysbiosis in the gut and a lot of inflammation and itchiness. We have to be thinking about that.
The other
So those
thing,
are kind of, there's,
sorry to interrupt, but the other thing that a lot of UK people use are these scented plugins. They plug in
oh,
the
yes,
house,
yes,
and
chemical.
they
Yes,
emit
Febreze is what it's called
an
here.
aromatic smell that I can't stand anyway. Every sort of 30
Yes,
seconds, and you would not believe how
those
sensitive
are
pets are to
bad.
those.
Bad. They're really bad for humans too. So everything I just stated is also bad for you.
Yeah,
So that's why I love what I get to do, because your pet gets healthier and then you as a nice like side effect get healthier too.
true.
So, but just people just don't know.
No,
When I do house calls, that was the first, I'd be smelling like the house and I'm like, that's interesting. Tell me, like, where's that coming from?
yeah,
Oh, we use the plugins all the time, or we have the plugin in the bathroom, or we're using the Febreze after. And I'm like, stop. Like, let's create a healthier alternative,
yeah,
because there are. So, like, once we know, we can do better.
yeah,
That is, the motto. So don't freak out. There are a lot of factors, but let's go through how to go by a step-by-step approach, because it can be quite simple to really help people. But once we like know certain causes, we can start going through this process of what do we actually do about that, so we don't leave you in a state of fear or panic with your dog.
yeah, exactly. So what are the 5 R's? Some people say 4 R's, we say 5 R's. So
Yes, so for me personally, I added a fifth R with reset because emotional health wasn't talked about.
yeah,
And because of like stress causing leaky gut, we need to focus on emotions and that type of thing. It's not the fun thing, right? People are like, I don't want to feel the thing, but we do have to assess that, especially if you do have a pet that's imbalanced and itchy. But first, number one, the first R, the 5 R's, is what we call remove. So this is where this is going to remove the resistance to helping your pet heal and become resilient so they can actually handle more. So we're making their bucket bigger of what we can put in it before we get to an itchy state, essentially. So this is where we talked about nutrition, obviously. If we're feeding a processed food diet, getting over to a cleaner, less processed diet, whether that's a lightly cooked, whether it's a raw, we just want to get away from a lot of the things in that processed food that increases inflammation and stresses the microbiome. Now, this is also too going through that list of causes, chemicals. So are there certain things that we can start shifting away from? I always say if you're feeling overwhelmed, start with one thing.
yeah,
And then when you've got that down, you've got that as a habit and you feel good, move on to the next thing. So all these things don't need to be done right away. If you want to, for sake, peace of mind. I'm kind of like that where I'm like, we're getting it done. We're moving on.
yeah,
If you're like me, great. Just do it all at once. But if you're like, this is super overwhelming or I can't physically do all these things, start with one thing.
yeah,
So, change out the laundry detergent, get rid of the Glade plug-in things in the wall that are emitting the artificial fragrances. We also too want to look at, if you are using medications, where can we reduce or remove those? Does your pet actually need them? So if they're on that, having a conversation with your veterinarian is very important because some medications need to be weaned
yeah,
down. Can't take them straight off or it can make problems worse or create new ones. So keep that in mind. Also looking at things like, this is also too where I'm starting to think about detox pathways, right? So making sure the elimination phase is working. So I want people, so for everyone here, I want you to be thinking about how regular is my dog pooping? That's an elimination phase, is that gut, right? So if they're constipated, if they're prone to diarrhea, we know we have to support that elimination phase even more because those toxins are getting stuck in the body. So it's something to think about at this point, and we're going to talk about ways to repair that. But thinking about remove, what are the things we can start removing that are creating resistance to healing is where we want to start there. So
Yeah,
number
and
one,
then it might be that you remove certain proteins as well, that,
yes,
if
hot
if
proteins is one that I see aggravates things from food therapy.
yeah,
Like a lot of pets are on, what happens is I see this all the time, and lamb's not bad, but if your dog is really hot and inflamed, lamb is not my go-to
no,
because it is a hot protein here in the States. Venison tends to be hot over here in the States. I know it can vary depending on geography and things.
yeah,
But typically looking at like chicken, I'm not against chicken. Chicken is in Chinese medicine, a good qi tonic. Qi is energy. It can be very like easy to digest, but it's warming. And also too, a lot of the processed food diets, they use chicken and they use really poor quality
yeah.
chicken. So a lot of these pets actually have food sensitivities to chicken because it's so commonly used, and they had leaky gut and that immune system was stimulated. So we
Um,
ideally want to get to like a novel protein,
yeah,
ideally.
yeah, exactly. Especially if you've been, feeding these proteins for a long time as well, and your pet's
Yeah.
been struggling for a long time. It's always good to sort of remove those as well and start with something that they've not had before.
Yes, 100%. And rabbit's a great option. I find rabbit, it's cooling. It usually hasn't been used in like kibble diets either.
No.
So a lot of times dogs have not been exposed to that. So it's something where the gut's not working harder to process it, and it's taking pressure off of the immune system that's working harder at the time. So definitely looking at what proteins have we used and using a novel protein. So that's probably like the remove phase,
Yeah,
removing all those things one
yeah,
at a time.
great.
Okay.
So replace.
Okay. So number two. So, okay, we removed the things. Now we got to replace them. And we talked about kind of replacing with novel proteins,
Yeah,
right? So, from the food side of things, replacing with novel proteins. But this is also to replace and repair kind of blend together. Repair is number three. This is also where I'm thinking about to a lot of these dogs, especially if you have an older dog, as they age, their ability to digest their food goes down, just like it does in people. So a lot of times they're lacking the digestive enzymes that we actually need them to have to actually properly break down to absorb the food so it doesn't create an immune response.
hmm,
So I'll a lot of times add in a digestive enzyme. I know ProDog Raw has some great products there that you can use. And then also to making sure that we are feeding a balanced diet for the most part. Now, sometimes I'm using a more limited ingredient diet at the beginning, but I find a lot of pet parents, they're well intentioned and they don't realize like they switch to like a meat and vegetable diet that's not balanced. And they see an improvement in their dog's like coat because we went from a processed food diet to a fresh whole food diet.
yeah,
And so obviously the body's getting rid of those toxins. It's not exposed to it as much. But over time, what will happen because it doesn't have the vitamins and minerals and the calcium source from the bones and the organs and the glandulars, or even from synthetic vitamins and minerals, right? Not as ideal, but still essential if we're going to use foods that don't have the natural sources of those.
yeah,
We'll see over time nutritional deficiencies that can actually aggravate and look like allergies. So we do want to make sure we're using brands or following recipes that are balanced
yeah,
for our dogs, to make sure that we're not creating that too. So when you are replacing that food and that nutrition, keep that in mind. But this is also the phase where, I am looking at digestive enzymes as first step to help break down things and better absorb. And once again, when we break down the food particles into smaller amino acids, it's less likely that the immune system will have a reaction to it,
yeah. I
and
mean
then lead to
that's
itchiness.
yeah. Our digest supplement was obviously with help via yourself was formulated for that reason. It contains the digestive enzymes along with other ingredients to help with that digestive tract and microbiome. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yep. And it's super easy, and most dogs tolerate it really well, which is great. So definitely starting there. Super easy.
Yeah. So how long would you say this sort of process takes for I mean, I know every dog's different, as we know, and every dog starts at a different sort of health level, depending on how
Yeah.
long they've been like this and their age and genetics and everything else. But as I say, it's do we have any sort of timescales that we should be looking at, or
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. We'll kind of assess each one. Like, obviously, the pet will be like the dog will be an individual. So, if they have a really sensitive gut, I'm not a huge fan of like the quick transition. I know pets can do fine. I'm not a fan of having bloody diarrhea and going to the ER. I might do my best to avoid that
no?
experience. And I feel like slow is much better and
Yeah,
peaceful journey than a sick pet getting sicker.
yeah,
So this is where typically keep in mind the remove phase is occurring this whole time, especially if you're picking one thing each week or whatever time frame you're looking at.
yeah,
So keep assessing everything in your home, everything you put on your body. Like, just think about, can I improve this? Can I replace this? So with your diet change, I typically say for a sensitive pet, talking about GI sensitivities. I'm looking at probably about a 2-week transition for
mhm,
those animals. Sometimes for a really, really sensitive pet that has like acid reflux and diarrhea along with their itchiness, it's going to be like 2 to 4 weeks
yeah,
before we're fully on their new diet because we go really slow. Now, we add in the digestive enzymes right away. If you notice any like irritation or grumbliness or anything like that, we go slower. So
yeah,
if you're adding in a digestive enzyme, say like the digest product, and you notice those symptoms, decrease the dose by half,
yeah,
stay on that for a couple days, get things calmed down, and then slowly increase up to the dose. Some dogs just need less,
yeah,
and that's okay. Because we just need to repair their body. Like, this is step number one.
yeah,
So I would say getting your dog onto the diet, getting them on the digestive enzymes. Once they're on, I would say, the digestive enzyme for a week and they seem pretty stable, this is when we move to the next like repair phase,
yeah,
is what I would do. So they're getting their food, they're getting their nutrients. We've lessened the burden of the inflammatory things that are going into their body. Now we're looking to step 3 of the 5 R's is repair things. So we got to start rebuilding. We have leaky gut, remember, we have inflamed gut lining. And this is where looking at, okay, what are the things that will soothe and calm, that will help bring down inflammation, that are key?
yeah,
So we have to repair the environment. We have to repair like mitochondria, cellular health, from a physiology perspective. And this is also to repairing the detox part also, because most of the time it's not working very well. It's overloaded. It's processing as much as it can. It's struggling to keep up.
yeah,
So this is where there's a lot of great products. The digest is great also for this, because there's other elements in that to help. This is also where I like starting. If you are scared, I find a lot of pet parents are really scared, right? They've tried different things and they've seen things flare up and they're
yeah,
terrified. They're like, I don't want to give something that harms them. My go-to, which is very easy and simple, is using teas. So teas, and it's in the tea, like cheers, the tea you drink.
yeah.
So I know over the UK, going back to the British, I gained my tea habit in New Zealand, the British influence. And so I know you people love your tea.
We do love our
so,
tea, we do.
so that's great. So now your dog gets to enjoy a cup of tea with you. One of the teas that I absolutely love using for allergies is chamomile.
Yeah,
Chamomile is amazing. It's an anti-inflammatory. It's also a cooling herb energetically. It's very soothing to the gut lining. And the other nice benefit with it is that it's also going to help calm the nervous system. So remember, we said stress can
yeah,
create leaky gut. So that's the power of using certain types of herbs to create balance and calm down things. So brewing a cup of chamomile tea, you can remove the tea, like the chamomile flowers if you want. I have some clients that give the whole thing to their animals. And you just have to see what works best and what your dog will want to eat.
yeah,
But just using the tea water itself is very beneficial. And if you have an itchy pet that has sores or hot spots, I would also use it topically to help soothe and calm down an inflamed skin. So that's a nice thing. We can use it internally and we can use it externally. The
Excellent.
other one also that's really powerful for healing inflamed like gut lining and also soothing the skin is calendula.
Hmm.
So calendula is another very soothing. It soothes the mucous membranes. It also helps repair the skin. So calendula is another great option to use. And then your omega-3s. So this is the time if you're not using a good omega-3 product, we want to add something in. Now, if your pet's sensitive to white fish, which a lot of pets who are itchy, they might have a sensitivity. So if you give something, you see them get itchier, that can indicate a sensitivity.
Yeah.
They can be sensitive to anything. So that's why a journal is really helpful too. During this 5R process, you're keeping notes. I've added that. This is how my dog is doing. There can be delays of like up to 3 days. So keep that in mind. So when we're adding new things in, especially in the repair phase, space them out 3 to 5 days and keep a journal so you can keep track of on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is nonstop itchiness. 1 is like, we're good. Like a normal scratch and itch is okay, just like for us, right?
Yeah.
But make sure you're objectively like measuring them every single day so you have a much better idea of what is working, what might not be working. Keeping in mind the things that we're doing, like the enzymes, are meant for long term.
Hmm.
They're not meant like make the allergies improve like overnight. A lot of these things have to heal. It takes time.
Yeah.
So this repair phase, this could be months.
Yeah.
So this is where getting our mindset right of like, okay, this allergies, the itchiness did not happen overnight.
No.
It took time for the body to break, right? For the body to actually manifest these symptoms, things were going on before that. So it's going to take time to heal it once again. So we have to put the patient's pants on, is what I always say, like
Yeah,
having
and
the
I
patient.
always say to people, just note the little tiny improvements that you might see.
And
You might not.
celebrate the heck out of
Yeah,
it.
exactly, because you're moving in the right direction. And
Yes.
you
And
don't always notice things, but by journaling them and documenting them, you will be able to look back and go, yeah, we're moving in the right direction. Things are improving here.
yes. And I think too, the biggest thing and this is like the whole mindset piece is that I liken the journey. It is a journey and it's not always a fun journey. Like
No.
I've been on it personally. That's how I found holistic medicine. And it's one of those things where think of it like climbing a mountain, right? You get up to like at the top of the next like ridge and you're like, I made it. And you're like, oh, that was a false like ridge, right? And you're like, there's more to go, right? And sometimes we enter a valley where it seems like we've gone backwards, our pet might have a flare up.
Yeah.
And I want everyone here to view flare ups as a time for reflection. It's not a time to just give up and say, nothing I did worked. We need to start all over. It's like, okay, well, what shifted? Let's go back to those foundations and the basics. Did I add something in that I haven't removed yet that might be creating resistance? Are we going through a more stressful period in our household? Okay, that's okay. Like it's okay to have stress, but when we recognize it, we can do something about it. So this would also be like repairing the adrenal glands. Maybe we need to add in something like CBD or ashwagandha or more calming Western herbs
Yeah.
to help calm down that stress. So now you become like the scientist versus like where we react poorly, to everything and we give up. And this is where I see so many pet parents essentially fail
Yeah.
with managing itchy pets is because they put their hands up and they're like, I don't know what to do anymore. But if we go back to these 5 R's and those pillars of health, then we can move out of that emotional reactive state. Yes, we can honor the feelings, be like, this sucks, right? But go back to these 5 R's and come at it from that objective viewpoint of like, okay, we slid down the hill a little bit. Okay, I'm going to sit in the grassy valley and think and reflect. I'm not going to like stop everything. I'm going to look at what changed and go from there. And that I guarantee you will help you get progress much faster and it will make it much easier for you emotionally and also too like of what to do. It helps clarify a lot of things. I use this personally with my husband and his IBD. If there's any flare ups, it's not like, well, all the good we did is ruined over the past 10 years, right? It's like, okay, well, what happened? Sometimes we don't know, but we always go back to the foundations and the principles we're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, and I
So,
mean, we've not obviously we're still on repair, and the next R is obviously re-inoculate, and I think
yep.
when we go through that, which I'll leave you to explain, is sometimes we can re-inoculate a little bit too hastily, and that's when
Yes.
flare-ups will happen. So it's not that it's
Yes.
not working; it's just that you know,
Yeah,
um,
it's telling us slow
yeah,
down,
slow
slow
down.
down. Like,
So
yeah. So the other thing too with repair, so I mentioned detox pathways. So this is where using things like burdock root is really powerful and
yeah,
helpful. It's very gentle. It also works on the lymphatic system to help get toxins out. It is a very cooling herb also. So it's going to help calm down the inflammation. So burdock using dandelion root, even putting dandelion leaves in the food can be very powerful and helpful too for opening up those detox pathways. Of course, milk thistle is always talked about,
yeah,
but there's different phases of detox
yeah,
that I teach on that many people don't realize. Like a lot of pets get stuck between phase 1 and phase 2, and the toxins are being processed into more toxic compounds. They get stuck because we don't have the nutrients to actually work the enzymes in phase 2 in the liver to actually turn it into a water soluble toxin to then be removed through the kidneys and the digestive tract.
yeah,
So when we utilize these different herbs and different things like L-glutamine and making sure there's enough taurine to help support those detox pathways and help heal the gut lining, things move more quickly through versus backing up and then getting pushed back out into the bloodstream
yeah,
and creating more inflammation. The other big thing too for an itchy pet is the use of binders. So binders in the repair phase. So in the repair phase, we're still in that phase
yeah,
when we're pushing toxins out, we're processing all the excess histamine that's making your pet itchy. We need something to catch them, to bind to them, to get them out of the body. So, binders are going to be like the biggest one that most people can have heard of are things like activated charcoal. It's a very broad spectrum binder. You can use it, but you just can't use it with like your main meals because it'll bind to nutrients and vitamins, minerals. It's meant for short term, like toxin use. So, a lot of the ones that we tend to use are going to be things like your clinoptolites or your zeolites, which include things like humic and fulvic acid. So,
hmm
they have certain ion charges that like suck the toxins to them and then they get them out.
yeah,
So these are really helpful for itchy pets. I've had a lot of patients where they've added in just a binder and their itchiness like downgraded 5 numbers
yeah,
from that scale of 1 to 10. So binders are commonly not known about or forgotten about as part of like the detox pathways and that repair phase. So using a binder is really helpful also.
yeah. I mean, we do have lots of varying. You've got activated charcoal powders, so it obviously depends on how your dog is with taking these things in water or whatever, or broths. I
Yeah.
find broths are probably easier on those,
Yeah.
but you can get the capsules as well. And the capsules, I think,
Yeah.
sometimes in my house are easier because anything smeared with a bit of pate on or something, homemade pate,
Yeah.
will go down. So
Yeah, and chlorella also too is a really great binder, and it also
yeah,
provides additional nutrients. So chlorella is a great one if you're like, what can I use to like kind of like tick the box on all these areas? Chlorella is a great
we
option.
love
So
chlorella at ProDog. We love it.
yeah, yeah, it's great. It's amazing. It's a superfood. So chlorella is really safe and it does a lot of great beneficial things for the body for repairing it, supporting those detox pathways, getting heavy metals out.
Yeah,
It's just a great all around product for dogs and people. I know we're not talking about people, but same principles.
it is. It is.
Are-
So that's repair. So are we done with repair? Are we sort of, do you think we've
Yeah,
gone
I
through
think
that?
that gives people enough stuff. Yep, definitely. So some tools there. Once again, space things apart. If you're adding new things in, I always say start with one thing because you might not need all the things, but remember to be thinking about, your detox, your gut lining, the microbiome, which we're going to talk about more. Um, and yeah, we'll go more into the microbiome with this next step. So
Okay, great. So number 4 is re-inoculate after repair.
Yes. Yes. So this is where a lot of people start with probiotics, right? And they're like, why does my dog get itchier? And this is because we haven't set up the ecosystem well. There's too much inflammation. And also, too, certain strains of probiotics may actually produce more histamine and
Hmm.
aggravate things. They can also aggravate if your pet has an overgrowth of bad bacteria like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So it's actually can be like adding gasoline to the fire a
Hmm.
lot of times. So if you've done that in the past, for everyone here, don't worry. Think like write it down because that shows us patterns and imbalances. When we see something happen with like an herb or a supplement we're giving, there's always a reason why. So if that's happened, that's probably what was going on. But now you've done the first 3 R's already. So we're prepped the body, the gut to be better able to actually receive beneficial microbes. So this is where it's all about repopulating the microbiome, where we can use things like fermented foods. So these are going to be things like kefir. They can be like sauerkraut. Some people use things like kombucha. Um, Here's my disclaimer on fermented foods. If you use it, don't add in probiotics supplement also. Use your fermented foods alone.
Yeah.
And if you notice an increased itchiness, remove your fermented foods through this product because sometimes they will actually increase histamine for certain dogs.
Yeah.
So once again, you're the scientist keeping that journal. But a lot of dogs do really well with fermented foods. So keep that in mind. Smaller amounts, less is more.
Yeah, exactly.
More is not more. Like more is not better in this situation in this phase. And it's the same with probiotics. Like everyone just wants to give probiotics, and sometimes we can create imbalances too. This is where test don't guess is another motto of mine.
Yeah.
So if you're able to access microbiome testing, do that first
Mhm.
because you may not need to supplement with probiotics. So keep that in mind. Now, it's not a bad thing to do, but there can be ups and downs that come with this phase if we kind of go gung ho with it. So, biggest thing in this phase though is also being aware of what's called prebiotics. So, prebiotics are going to be the food that feeds the beneficial microbes.
Mhm.
So this is going to be things like medicinal mushrooms, your asparagus. You'll see products and supplements that are things like inulin, your fructooligosaccharides or FOS will show up on like labels too. Those are a prebiotic. Your
Mhm.
microbes in your dog's gut need food to survive.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they die. So if we don't have any source of fiber coming into that diet or through a supplement, it's going to be really hard for those microbes to thrive. So this is where I know there's mixed camps on like they shouldn't have vegetables, they shouldn't have fiber. I'm not in that camp. And there's a lot of research around like we do need to feed for a healthy microbiome, we actually do need to feed it, and that's how we feed it. So the other thing too is so with your beneficial micro like probiotics, so Saccharomyces boulardii is a beneficial yeast. A lot of people are like, a yeast? Why would I want a yeast? Don't we have a yeast overgrowth, right?
Uh-huh.
It scares the heck out of dog parents and pet parents in general. It doesn't work that way. So this is a really good, happy, beneficial yeast that helps modulate, makes the immune system work better locally in the gut, and it's actually going to support a healthy microbiome. And it doesn't typically lead to an imbalance or dysbiosis. So it's in a lot of products for that very reason, because it helps manage things and it can help manage heavy metals and it has a lot of great properties and benefits with it.
Mhm.
So that's definitely one. If you're like, I want to start somewhere, that could be where you start. Lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, certain strains are also really common probiotics that are used too to help manage a healthy microbiome also. So once again, slow and steady wins the race. Less is more in this phase. And once again, don't add lots of different things, especially when you're in this phase of the 5 R's.
Yeah, and as I say, if you suspect that your dog's got SIBO, then there's certain
Don't use
strains
them.
of bacteria that you should use, like soil-based, as opposed
Yeah.
to the other type based. So it's it's trying individual strains of probiotics or fermented vegetables, or you start with that first and just
Yeah.
see how your dog reacts, like you say,
Yeah.
because they're all different and one size does not fit all, as we know.
Yeah, your soil base, for everyone that may not be familiar with them, are things like your bacillus strains.
Yeah.
So the way that they work is, so if we have SIBO, that's going to be an overgrowth of bacteria at the start of the intestine, so the
Mhm.
small intestine. And the way the spore-based probiotics work is that they have a spore around them, so they're like protected. So they pass right through that and they get to the large intestine, and that's where they do their magic.
And they should be.
So your bacillus strains is what you should see on there, if you're looking at that.
Great. So we've gone through all of those, and then the last but not least is the
And the last
reset.
one,
Is the reset.
reset. Let's reset things, right? This is the one people hate doing because it makes like it. They're like, I don't need this. Isn't important. People hate feeling things, right? Emotional health and stress, and this is where I have found so many times, like we're doing all the right things and we're still stuck. And then we start exploring this fifth R. And, another quote I commonly use is, you can't feed a stressed pet back to health.
No.
You just can't. So if we're living in a constant state of stress, things don't work as well. And it's a block on the healing process. So this is where, once again, like testing can be really helpful, because our animals, and especially dogs, are very good at hiding stress. So, looking at, well, they can't seem vulnerable, right? Because something might come and pick them off in the wild, right?
Yeah.
They've got to be strong, or they may feel also too, especially with dogs in certain types of households, they may feel like they need to step up and be the leader. If there is a lot of stress or chaos, and to no fault of people, like, we live in a crazy world, there is a lot of stress.
Yeah.
But once again, when we become aware of it, there's a lot of really easy tools that we can use to help manage it. And so, once again, just reflecting on, okay, well, what is my environment like? Do we have routine? Now, dogs thrive on routine. If they're like, I don't know when I'm going to be fed. I don't know if I'm going to get food today. I don't know if my owner's going to come back, like, because
Yeah.
the routine and the schedule is all over the place. They might sit there by the window waiting and worried, thinking of, I mean, they are very emotionally intelligent beings.
Mhm.
And so just looking at, okay, well, where you may not be able to change all the things, depends on people's work schedule. I'm not asking you to quit your job and like that kind of stuff. But with being aware of, like, okay, where can I create more routine? Where do I need to put in more physical exercise or engagement? Environmental enrichment would fall into this R. Are we playing enough with them? Are we actually engaged? The amount of times that I am out running or walking and I see people walking their dogs and they're on their phones, put the freaking phone away. Put the phone away. I know that's going to probably trigger some people, but you're not present with your dog. You're not even present in the walk. Like, I've seen people almost like run into people, and I'm like, what are you doing? Put your phone away. You're going to fall off the like edge of the side of like the trail. Like, you know? So simple things like that. Why are you taking the walk? Put the phone away for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that your dog will feel the shift in your energy and the presence with them. It is a huge healing element for them. And you will also feel more amazing and grounded because of it too.
Yeah.
We live in a very reactive environment. So if we can set up things like that to help ourselves, it'll make a huge difference for everyone. It's the ecosystem. The other big thing too in this, with the emotional like wellness piece, is that many people aren't breathing properly, right? Short, rapid breaths. We don't even know it. Like, we're not actually getting oxygen into our bodies. We're just doing our best to get through life and get through our day. So a simple, easy tool that you can use is to literally take what's called the perfect breath. 4 breaths in, hold, 4 breaths out. Do it 3 times, and do it in a room where your pets are. And what automatically happens when you do this perfect breath technique is that it will shift your body into what's called parasympathetic nervous system state. That is the rest and digest phase.
Yeah.
So the flip is the sympathetic. That's fight or flight. Most people and a lot of animals are in fight or flight. So just by doing this simple exercise at any time, but at least once a day, maybe probably the best time if you work and you come home and you don't feel grounded, do it when you get in the house or even to help bring a different energy into the household. Your dogs will feel it. A lot of times, because my clients utilize this technique, their dog will actually take deep breaths with them. It is the coolest thing.
Yeah.
Um, so like that, like we don't need to give a ton of supplements, right? These simple things, a lot of times when we just once again become aware of it and we start implementing it and turning it into a habit from getting more movement, getting outside. You know, one of the things I love doing with my previous dog Finn was just sitting in the grass with him, like grounding and just being present. Like look at the birds and the flowers, and he would just sit there looking with me. He absolutely loved it. Simple things like that will help make the healing process much easier because once again, it's removing resistance and it's actually setting them into a healing state. And that's really, really key. I call this like the healing mindset.
Yeah.
And it allows you to become more resilient too if we do slip down the hill and we enter that valley, right? Because you've grounded yourself more and you've made your bucket bigger to handle more things so you can be the best advocate for your dog. So definitely thinking about those things. We use hair tissue mineral analysis tests to assess dogs also, and cats, of course, where we look at a fur sample, we send it to the lab, and they'll give us different values for vitamins, minerals. We're looking at cellular health over the past 3 months. But we also I analyze different ratios, and there's adrenal gland ratios. Are we stuck in like, what is the nervous system doing? So are we stuck in sympathetic overdrive? And the majority, 94% of dogs are stuck in a sympathetic overdrive and their adrenal glands are working harder. And it doesn't mean we see it outwardly as like they're running around frantic or super anxious, but internally, things are working harder. And so, based on that information, we follow the 5 R's, we look at those foundations, and then we help support with some of the repair things we talked about to help bring the stress, but also address the emotional health and the whole ecosystem in the house, looking at, okay, well, what can you do as their pet parent? Can't implement all the things, and that's okay. But what are some simple, easy things that you can do? And just start there. And once again, keep track of how are you feeling? How is your pet feeling? What is their level of itchiness? You know, what are you using supplement wise? And just moving forward from there. And the neat thing is you can keep repeating these 5 R's and going back to it. It's your framework that you're working from to actually heal your pet's imbalances, which are manifesting as increased itchiness.
Yeah, and by utilizing sort of the microbiome tests, I know we advocate Pet Biome in the UK with Dr. Carol Hughes, and you get such a
Yeah.
brilliant breakdown of basically the varieties of good bacteria, the bad bacteria is in there, where the diversity of it all, so that you can really look at that if you're still struggling after going through all these sort of
Yes.
5 R's. And as I say, with your blueprint program, which is available to anybody in the UK, in the world, and going through these hair mineral tests, which I've used myself personally, and if you've got the right person with the understanding like yourself that can analyze them properly, they are
Yeah.
amazing tools.
Yeah, it's one of the things like with our blueprint program, because it's an online support program that teaches and supports pet parents through these 5 R's and then implementing our 5 pillars of health also. It becomes more manageable and easier where you're just right now, so many pet parents feel like they're throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping it sticks. And then it doesn't work. And then they go back to the drawing board, but they're just trying different things based on, seeing someone use that and that process does not work. You may get lucky and see a little bit of improvement, but if we truly want to heal at the root cause level, we have to go deeper. Those tests are very helpful and powerful for speeding up the process to see where those imbalances are. And then going through the 5 R's and keeping in mind the pillars of health,
Yeah.
physical health, gut health, nutrition, your immune health, your environmental health and detox, and then your emotional health. And that's where coming back to those, it grounds you. It just makes things easier for you when you go on this journey that's going to have ups and downs.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll put lots of links below this with the Blueprint program that you can enroll on, and the pet biome and all the other great things that we've discussed and blogs today. So thank you very much. Hopefully that was very useful for people that are struggling and stuck in that rut where they don't know where to turn. But there is always hope. And, if you start following the guidelines, we're pretty confident that you will get to where you want to do, and your pet's a lot comfier and soothed.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much for having me,
No, you're
Allison. And
welcome.
thank you for everyone taking time to watch and learn and just wanting the best for their dogs.